Hey guys, tonight, we're venturing into the velvet-draped hush of a Victorian bedroom, where insomnia isn't just a nuisance. It's practically a moral failing. The room is cloaked in layers of darkness, every window smothered in floor-length curtains, the color of drying blood. Outside, the soot-black streets of London press against the walls, like a damp memory. Inside, the silence is nearly total, except for the faint hiss of a gas lamp and the oppressive tick of a mahogany wall clock. You're tucked beneath an absurd number of woolen blankets, already beginning to sweat. But it's all for your health, apparently. They say you need pitch darkness to sleep well. But this is Victorian darkness, the kind that feels like you're being buried alive in velvet. Forget nightlights. Even moonlight is a threat. You might not survive this without a bit of candlelight rebellion. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is there right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You enter the bedroom slowly, half expecting to find a corpse in the bed, rather than someone preparing for a restorative night's sleep. The windows are triple-shrouded lace, then brocade, then velvet, as though natural light might somehow vaporize you. The Victorians didn't just dim the lights, they suffocated them. Historians still argue whether this obsession with total blackout came from medical advice or a cultural fetish for somber interiors. Either way, you can't see your own hand, and that's apparently a good thing. The curtains do more than block light. They muffle sound trap smells and create a sensory deprivation chamber that's supposed to lull you into unconsciousness. But instead, your brain starts narrating its own horror novel. You stumble toward the bed. It's high, wooden, and intimidating, more like a throne than a place of rest. You need a step stool to climb into it. Once there, you're engulfed in counterpane's bolster pillows and a thing called a bed rug that's roughly the weight of a medium-sized dog. This isn't comfort. This is compression therapy by Victorian standards. And just as you're adjusting, the door creaks open and a servant pads in. She's here to close the curtains again. Yes, even more. She murmurs something about drafts and nerve winds, because Victorian medicine was obsessed with the idea that invisible breezes might rob you of your sleep or your sanity. They didn't know about REM cycles, but they were convinced that a poorly placed curtain could invite madness into your home. Gaslight hisses from the hallway. Even that, an innovation at the time, is suspect. People worried the fumes from gas lamps were causing light poisoning. You're not sure what that means, but you nod solemnly as the servant pinches the flame shut and leaves you in stifling, muffled dark. Outside the heavy curtains, the world shifts on its industrial axis. Trains rattle, factories hum, and newsboys yell about empire. But in here, none of that matters. The goal is purity, rest, stillness. The Victorians believed your sleep environment reflected your moral character. A chaotic room suggested a chaotic mind. And yet, ironically, their bedrooms were bursting with visual clutter, embroidered samplers, religious prints, urns of artificial flowers. It's like sleeping inside a moral diorama. You stare up at the ceiling where faint shadows flicker from the dying fire. The room is so quiet, you can hear your own heartbeat, a sound you're now convinced is irregular. Welcome to pre-modern health anxiety, where every flutter of the body could be a prelude to Victorian nervous collapse. You'll be prescribed a seaside retreat by Thursday if you don't pull it together. But sleep won't come. The bed creaks every time you breathe. Your feet are slightly damp, possibly from the foot bath you were ordered to take in tepid lavender water, or possibly from the lingering dampness of your wool socks, which you're still wearing, because taking them off might unbalance the bodily humors. And let's not forget the bed curtains. Ah yes, curtains within curtains. These draped monstrosities hang around the frame like death shrouds. Supposedly, they keep in warmth. In reality, they trap your anxiety like a haunted Victorian Instagram filter. Still, the belief persists. Block out the world, and the mind will follow. You pull the bed curtains shut and instantly regret it. Now you're in a fabric coffin. But maybe that's what they wanted Victorian sleep as a rehearsal for the grave. After all, you sleep in black. You mourn in black. Everything's just one long preparation for respectable death. A noise breaks the silence, a single tick from the clock, which seems to echo through your ribcage. You consider removing it, but that would violate the sacred geometry of the room. Clocks are central to Victorian domesticity. They signal order, discipline, and the tyranny of time. You lie back. Tick, tock, tick, tock. It's not lulling. It's accusatory. Finally, you try to shift position, but the mattress stuffed with horsehair crunches like a bag of antique celery. Victorians swore by firm support for moral posture, but your spine is begging for a hammock. In the darkness, your mind begins to drift. Was this room always this warm? Is the gas lamp leaking? Did the footman close the kitchen flue? You begin compiling a mental list of all the ways your home could slowly kill you. You might have nodded off by now, if not for your rising conviction that the servant forgot to check the coal chute. Still, you close your eyes. The weight of the blankets presses you downward, as if encouraging you to sink into the floorboards. In a way, it's working. Maybe you're not falling asleep. Maybe you're just becoming sediment. Let it happen. That's what the Victorians would have wanted. You wake, or more accurately twitch sometime later, to the unmistakable sensation of being too awake. You're not sure how long you were unconscious, but it doesn't feel like sleep. More like being gently clobbered with a velvet pillow until you blacked out for 27 minutes. The room hasn't changed. It's still too dark, too silent, and now you realize far too stimulating. Odd, isn't it? In a space designed with sleep as its sacred mission, everything seems to nudge your brain toward insomnia. The heavy bed, the thermal prison of wool blankets, the vaguely judgmental silhouette of a porcelain angel on the dresser. It's all conspiring against rest. You stare at the clock again. 4:30 a.m. Victorian time, which is just like modern time, but with more guilt. In the Victorian era, the home was a temple of morality, but by night, it became a battleground. The enemy's sensory stimulation, gaslights, ticking clocks, midnight carriage wheels, and worst of all, books. Yes, books. If you were unfortunate enough to be a literate Victorian insomniac, reading in bed was absolutely frowned upon. Medical journals warned that exciting the imagination before sleep could cause hysteria nightmares, or brace yourself, cerebral inflammation. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine medical concern or just a clever ploy to keep people from enjoying cheap fiction after hours. Your bedside table probably holds something dry, like moral elevation through domestic obedience, or The Art of Drowsiness by Reverend B.P. Sedgwhistle. Anything with plot was considered dangerous. Better to reflect on the duties of wifehood or the perils of overexertion. But the real villain of sleep, according to Victorian doctors, is overstimulation. And the 19th century had just begun to flood the world with it. Gaslight turned night into day. Public transit buzzed across cities until midnight. Society was on the move, caffeinated and electrified. In the words of one exhausted physician from 1879, the brain, like the railway, is now always in motion. To counteract this, the sleep hygiene movement began to take root. You were instructed to avoid talking too much after dinner. No games, no laughter, no music in a major key. Emotional arousal of any kind was considered lethal to sleep. And so you lie there silent and stiff as a taxidermy squirrel. Your family is likely doing the same. Upstairs, your sister is probably sipping barley water and staring at the ceiling. Downstairs, your father may be pacing in the drawing room, unsure whether his lack of sleep signals a stomach ailment or spiritual ruin. That brings us to the bedroom's crown jewel of torment, the mechanical clock. You would think timekeeping would bring peace, order, regularity, a calming sense of routine. But no. The ticking becomes a metronome for your neuroses. Each second feels like a footstep toward madness. Victorian households loved their clocks. Every mantel had one, often under a glass dome, glinting like a preserved relic of precision. They were objects of pride, but at 3:00 a.m., they became sonic torture devices. One woman in 1884 famously filed a complaint with her physician about being hunted down by the chime. He advised her to breathe deeply and pray, which, to be fair, is also what one does during an exorcism. Even worse, some clocks chimed on the quarter hour. You had just enough time between rings to begin slipping into unconsciousness, only to be dragged back by an indignant ding. The clocks weren't just keeping time, they were keeping score. You sit up now, irritated and sweating, but be careful. Victorian doctors warned that rapid verticality upon waking could cause blood to rush from your brain and result in fainting nosebleeds or something called spinal uproar, which frankly sounds made up. Still, you're determined. You shuffle across the carpet in your flannel nightgown feet, whispering against the thick nap of the rug. The floorboards creak just once. Somewhere someone coughs in their sleep. You reach the window and peek out through a crack in the curtains. Outside, a fog presses against the pane like a sullen ghost. Somewhere a horse snorts. The city, though asleep, is still gently quivering. You meanwhile are wide awake and wondering if your liver is responsible. Yes, the liver. According to Victorian theory, insomnia was often blamed on faulty internal organs, usually the liver, sometimes the spleen, and occasionally your digestive wind. Doctors advised patients to avoid hearty meats after 5 p.m., to bathe their feet in vinegar, and to always abstain from shellfish on Tuesdays. It's hard to say whether these cures worked, but they certainly kept patients busy. Back in bed, you try to remember your last meal. Did it include beef, buttered parsnips? Did you inadvertently ingest nightshade elements? Was the goose pudding perhaps a little too exciting? You begin listing the items in reverse order, hoping to lull yourself back to sleep with sheer tedium. Stewed pear turnip, mash, molasses, loaf week tea. Then again, it may not be your diet. It could be your dreams. Victorians believed that vivid or lurid dreams were symptoms of overstimulated minds. You were supposed to purify your thoughts before bed. No arguments, no novels, and definitely no lustful recollections of Lord Hawthorne's cravat at last week's ball. In fact, one popular pamphlet from 1852 urged insomniacs to repeat calming phrases such as he makes me lie down in green pastures, or sleep is the servant of the good. It also advised avoiding cloistered environments, which is hilarious considering your bedroom looks like a priest's tomb. Still, you murmur the words. You try to still your mind, but your thoughts ping around like marbles in a tin. You are unfortunately alive during the golden age of the brain, and that brain, now aware of science and stress and the existence of wallpaper taxes, refuses to quiet. Sleep doesn't come, but knowledge does, and with it, an entirely new kind of restlessness. It's now morning, technically, though you wouldn't know it from inside your dimmed cocoon. The sun is up, but trapped behind those heroic layers of damask and lace. You're still lying flat on your back brain, chewing through last night's dreams like a dog with a soup bone. You dreamt of falling into a vat of ink, which your Victorian doctor would no doubt interpret as a crisis of moral character, or perhaps spleen congestion, or repressed ambition. It really depends on the mood he's in. And now it's time for your prescription lettuce. Not a salad, not even steamed, just lettuce water. You're told it's medicinal, calming, balancing to the humors. You sit at the edge of your bed in a cotton wrapper as a maid brings in a ceramic mug of the tepid, pale green liquid brewed from boiled romaine leaves, strained and cooled to room temperature. It smells faintly like swamp and disappointment, but Victorians swore by it. It's a fringe treatment by modern standards, but in the 1800s, lettuce water was a mild soporific. The leafy green contains a compound called lacticarium, sometimes dubbed lettuce opium for its sedative qualities. Though let's be honest, it's more like sleepy leaf juice than anything genuinely narcotic. Still, one popular Victorian household guide claims a broth of lettuce taken nightly will settle the mind and soothe the passions. The passions, you know, the thing preventing you from sleeping like a Victorian angel. Historians still argue whether lettuce water was genuinely effective or simply a ritual placebo, an earthy potion that gave sufferers a sense of control in an otherwise chaotic, sleepless age. Either way, you're now expected to sip this vegetal tea before bed, ideally without making a face. You obey. The drink is lukewarm and grassy, like someone steeped a houseplant. It slides reluctantly down your throat and sits heavy in your belly, radiating mild regret. But this is just one in a string of bizarre dietary interventions. You've also been told to avoid warming foods like pork and nutmeg after dusk. You are encouraged to eat cooling substances like cucumbers, oat jelly, and of course more lettuce. The logic a cool stomach means a cool mind. This was a time when people genuinely believed that emotions originated from organs, not just metaphorically, but biologically. Anger came from the liver, melancholy oozed from the spleen, and overexcitement, likely a rogue surge from your kidneys. You are in essence a walking soup of impulses, and bedtime is when they all bubble up. So you eat light, sip your chlorophyll potion, and try not to think too hard. Thinking leads to wakefulness, and wakefulness leads to scandal, or at least another appointment with Dr. Featherstone, who insists that your sleeplessness is likely due to overreading. Your bedroom now reeks of boiled greens and faint lavender oil. You lie down again, this time on your left side, because it's believed to aid digestion and calm the nerves. You press your face into the bolster pillow and exhale slowly. The bed groans. You groan. Somewhere a carriage rumbles down the lane, but the heavy curtains catch the sound and smother it. Even Queen Victoria herself reportedly suffered from insomnia. Letters suggest she wandered her halls, paced her rooms, and consulted an impressive number of physicians, all of whom suggested variants of "don't worry so much." Some prescribed port wine. Others suggested vigorous horseback riding. One particularly optimistic doctor offered her a tincture of lettuce water with a drop of laudanum. That night, she slept 14 hours. Coincidence? Possibly not. Because here's the twist. No one wants to talk about much of Victorian medicine was laced with things far stronger than lettuce. Cough syrup had morphine. Soothing powders had opium. And yes, some lettuce sleep tonics were secretly dosed with narcotics to increase their effectiveness. So there's a chance your great-grandmother wasn't peacefully drowsing off thanks to a salad infusion she was accidentally stoned. But she wouldn't have known. After all, the bottle said natural remedy, and everything in cursive looks wholesome. You shift in bed wondering if you're supposed to be feeling anything yet. Maybe a tingling sense of tranquility. Maybe a gentle fog descending over your thoughts. Maybe just a stomachache. Still nothing. But you're determined. You boil more lettuce. You even experiment with different varieties. Romaine, butterhead, curly endive. One pamphlet suggests combining it with chamomile or catnip. Another recommends soaking it in rainwater, collected during a thunderstorm for electrical balance. The quest for sleep turns you into a small-time apothecary, experimenting with herbs and decoctions like a wizard who's also really tired. Your shelf is now crowded with tinctures labeled by hand in shaky ink, lettuce and poppy mix. 2 drops only. Mint water for moonless nights. For nerves, with rue. You're not sure if you're sleeping better, but you've certainly developed a charming new hobby. Meanwhile, your neighbors have begun adopting lettuce water too. It spreads through the neighborhood like a very leafy plague. Women gather to discuss recipes. Men mutter over mugs of pale green liquid. One particularly creative gentleman adds gin. He claims it clarifies the vision. You drink your cup in solidarity and tuck yourself in head once more against the scratchy lace of your pillowcase. Maybe tonight will be different. Maybe the lettuce has finally found its moment. You close your eyes. The room breathes around you. The air is thick with boiled greens and desperation. Somewhere in the distance, a clock begins its slow, smug ticking. You imagine it stops. You imagine silence. And in that imagined hush, sleep finally arrives silent, cautious, and maybe just a little confused. You awaken to the sound of your own breathing, slow and uncertain, like a cautious guest who isn't sure they were invited. The bed is still heavy atop you, a Victorian masterpiece of linen wool and expectations. This isn't just a blanket. This is a quilted manifesto. You try to shift an arm and realize your body is being firmly pressed into the mattress by about 15 pounds of layered textiles. It's not unpleasant exactly, just absolute. You're swaddled like an oversized infant, except you're also surrounded by the grim decorum of 19th century sleep science. Welcome to the era of proto-weighted blankets, where the more quilts you stacked, the closer you came to conquering your agitated vibrations. You were told to pile on the coverings, a counterpane, then a bed rug, then a down-stuffed quilt, and finally, a crocheted coverlet made by your aunt, who genuinely believes lace is therapeutic. Victorians feared drafts, the way modern folks fear Wi-Fi radiation, anything unseen, untouchable, and possibly responsible for their slow descent into madness. And so, you're buried. the sensation is oddly effective. The weight calms you, compresses you, makes you feel like you're being gently prepared for display in a casket. It's strangely reassuring. Historians still argue whether this blanket obsession stemmed from medical doctrine or pure cultural inertia. Some say it was about internal regulation of bodily energy. Others claim it was a holdover from medieval humoral theory, where cold and dry bodies needed warming and moistening, but not in any fun way. Either way, you've never seen a household with so many comforters. Even the dog sleeps under a tartan shroud. And then there's the feather bed. Not just on top, but beneath. You're lying on what feels like a cloud stuffed with duck dreams. Supposedly, it conforms to your body. In practice, it slides to one side and stays there, creating a kind of fluffy cliff edge you have to navigate during the night. You wake up clinging to the bed frame like a shipwreck victim. Still, these weighted layers were believed to suppress nervous agitation, the bane of the Victorian mind. Sleep wasn't passive rest. It was a moral trial. You were meant to fall asleep calmly and stay asleep without violent tossing. Anything else implied spiritual weakness, or worse, an undiagnosed illness of the spine. The spine gets blamed for a lot, actually. A twitchy leg spine, teeth grinding spine, nightmares involving overly friendly clergymen. Definitely spine. To help calm these nocturnal disturbances, many Victorians added special blankets, scented with rosemary camphor or carbolic acid paste, which smells exactly as inviting as it sounds. Others placed warm bricks at the foot of the bed. One family even sewed tiny bells into the blanket's edges to ward off dream spirits. You try not to think about how many bells you'd need to chase off your own, and still, the night stretches on. You lie there flat and motionless, weighed down, like an archaeological find. You're not supposed to move too much. Movement implies restlessness. Restlessness implies weakness. Weakness implies scandal. It's a chain reaction that ends with your neighbors whispering over garden fences about your nocturnal inelegance. So you don't move. Instead, you listen, and you sweat. Victorian houses were not known for good ventilation. The windows are sealed to keep out bad air. The fireplace is decorative or worse, stuffed with fragrant herbs and forget-me-nots. You're marinating in your own damp humanity. It's like a sauna, but with doilies. You shift slightly. The mattress responds with a tortured sigh. Your joints crackle like a haunted puppet. Maybe you think this is just how sleep worked back then. Less like floating on a cloud, and more like being carefully stacked into unconsciousness. And yet, beneath the layers, something strange happens. Your breathing slows. Your heartbeat thuds like a metronome, steady and dull. The weight around you creates a cocoon, a miniature cave of fabric and fringe. The world recedes. You sink. This perhaps is what they were after. Not comfort exactly, but containment. A sense that the body is no longer required to behave to twitch, or ache, or worry. It's pinned in place like a note under glass, still preserved out of harm's way. You don't dream, or if you do, the dreams are slow, soft, and remarkably beige, possibly involving marmalade. No grand allegories, no subconscious betrayal, just toast and maybe a slow stroll through a hedge maze. The kind of dream where nothing bad happens, but also nothing at all happens. The ideal Victorian scenario. In the morning, your joints ache, but your mind feels surprisingly clear. The blankets are peeled back like archaeological layers, each one removed like a sacred relic. Linen, cotton, wool, more wool. One you think is horsehair. And finally, freedom. The air hits your skin like a revelation. You stretch gently, of course, and sit up. You didn't sleep deeply, but you slept correctly. You rise cautiously, still swaddled in the vestiges of last night's dreamless weight. The bed groans in protest. As you slide your feet onto the carpet, you're immediately reminded of one of the quieter obsessions of Victorian sleep culture: absolute silence. You don't live in a bedroom. You live in a soundproof shrine. Every step is muffled by thick, tufted carpeting. Not a luxurious choice, but a moral one. Hardwood floors may echo, and echoing implies distraction. Distraction leads to sleeplessness. Sleeplessness leads to neurosis. And then before you know it, you're being prescribed a month at a seaside sanitarium with only mutton broth and bleak novels for company. Victorian homes were obsessed with controlling acoustics. Long before noise-canceling headphones and ambient rain apps, there was carpet and curtains and wall tapestries and fringe, so much fringe, the kind that makes you worry. It might whisper at you if the lights flicker. Historians still argue whether this devotion to hush was purely about sleep, or also a class performance, a way to show that one's home was disciplined, controlled, and not subject to the vulgarities of the outside world. Probably both. You shuffle toward the door. Even it opens silently, oiled and padded at the hinges. The handle doesn't click. There's a soft give, like the house itself is trying not to wake the neighbors. Downstairs, no one is speaking. The kitchen is active, but it sounds like someone trying not to disturb a seance. You pass through drawing rooms so hushed they might as well be sepulchres, and enter the parlor where your mother is doing embroidery, her needle flicking through cloth in a rhythm that could put a monk to sleep. She glances at you, one eyebrow arched. You're not to speak just yet. Morning conversation is only permitted after tea, and only if it's strictly necessary. You sit. The sofa is overstuffed and underused. The lace doily beneath you shifts slightly, and you freeze, worried that you've disrupted the balance of the room. Victorian domestic etiquette turns everyone into a slightly nervous statue. Silence is medicinal. That's what Dr. Grimshaw says. He published an entire pamphlet called The Nocturnal Quietude of Domestic Environments, which became all the rage among upper-class households. According to him, auditory clutter was one of the greatest threats to restorative sleep. He even suggested that the very architecture of homes should reflect the need for quiet, thicker walls, fewer exterior windows, and something called interior hush layers, which were just elaborate ways of saying, please put more drapes everywhere. You return upstairs, walking heel-toe, like a burglar in church. You re-enter your bedroom now, cool and vaguely floral. The maid has opened one curtain just a crack. A shaft of gray light slices through the darkness, illuminating a small table, with your sleep tools arranged like ceremonial instruments, the lettuce water mug, a folded cloth for your forehead, and your journal, titled in embossed script, Night Reflections and Nervous Woes. You sit to write. Victorians were great believers in tracking symptoms. You must record how you slept, what time you retired, whether your dreams were humid or dry, whether you awoke with a start or with a pleasing sense of physical accord. The language is poetic and unhelpful, but you play along. You write slept adequately, no dreams, temperature stable, minor elbow tingling, one creak heard, and then you stop, because the silence is no longer comforting. It's oppressive. Modern minds are accustomed to a certain baseline hum fans, traffic-distant voices, the occasional podcast mumble. But here the silence is so total, it starts to develop texture. You begin hearing your own thoughts, with unsettling clarity. The sound of your blinking, the twitch of your right eye, the scraping of your molars when you swallow. The house may be asleep, but your brain is building an opera, and still, you dare not break the silence, because doing so would break the spell. Victorian sleep is not just about resting, it's about enacting a ritual that demands your full participation, your respect, and your absolute silence. Some families went so far as to purchase sound-dampening furniture, stuffed ottomans, soft-edged tables, wall-mounted cushions not for comfort, but to stifle echoes. It was believed that a jarring sound at night could crack the brain's composure like a dropped dish, shattering someone's peace of mind. One household famously covered their piano with 3 layers of cloth every evening, just in case a wayward breeze struck the keys and summoned a ghost sonata. And don't even think about snoring. Snoring was considered a defect of character. Husbands were shamed. Wives were pitied. Children were marched to doctors. You might be made to sleep with a cork in your mouth, or lie on your back in a snore-curbing brace that straps your chin to your chest. One man even patented a bed that would tip you sideways if you snored, sending you tumbling into consciousness, like a sack of Victorian gilt. So you train yourself to breathe lightly, delicately, like a museum exhibit trying not to set off alarms. Eventually, the house stirs. The maid speaks to the cook. The dog barks once. You feel your own shoulders drop, the tension ebbing slightly. It's okay now to exist at full volume. Daylight has resumed custody of the home. But tonight, the silence will return, and you will welcome it like a strict governess with soft slippers, not out of love, but out of obligation. Dinner is over, and the conversation, what little there was of it, has ended with an almost theatrical quiet. The table is cleared, the candlelight extinguished, and the family disperses like whispered smoke, each retreating to their corner of the house. You, meanwhile, are left in a room that feels as if it's been freshly embalmed. There is one rule that now governs your evening hours: no laughing after dinner. It seems absurd to modern sensibilities, but in the Victorian household, late evening merriment was discouraged with the same sternness, usually reserved for gambling or public nudity. The idea was simple emotional agitation, especially the giddy kind was dangerous. Joy, when timed poorly, could wreck your sleep, disturb your digestion, and possibly throw off your entire nervous rhythm. You think about this as you sit stiffly in a brocade chair, a book in your lap that you're not allowed to enjoy. A fire crackles in the grate, but not too loudly. Even the flames seem cowed. Historians still argue whether this particular social restraint came more from moral instruction or medical theory. Likely both. Doctors believed that laughter elevated the pulse and introduced unnecessary excitations to the system. The church, meanwhile, warned that jokes, especially those told after 7 p.m., were gateways to indolence and vice, and you thought your bedtime routine was intense. Evening entertainment, if allowed at all, was supposed to be soothing, virtuous, and quiet. Readings from Pilgrim's Progress, perhaps a few lines of Wordsworth, gentle embroidery. You might be permitted to hum softly, as long as the tune didn't contain any alarming major intervals. Something like, "God rest ye merry gentlemen," but without the merry. You shift in your seat and glance around. the others are doing their part. Your sister is darning socks with the furrowed concentration of someone performing delicate surgery. Your father is pretending to read the newspaper but has been on the same page for 20 minutes. Your aunt is sipping her barley water as though it's a fragile potion. And you're starting to get the giggles. It's dangerous, this. You know it. The pressure of enforced calm makes your thoughts behave badly. You recall a line from a novel you weren't supposed to read, something about an archduke and a pudding accident, and now it's dancing around in your brain like a ticklish ghost. You cough to cover a smile. The room notices. There is a pause in the darning. The newspaper rustles accusingly. You swallow it down. Victorians believed that laughter after dinner disrupted digestion. The abdominal contractions might, according to one theory, force your supper upward, or worse, sideways. You once read a pamphlet warning that laughter could agitate the lower bowel to alarming unrest. You don't know what that means, but it sounds ominous enough to suppress a chuckle. The obsession with emotional neutrality was especially strong among the upper middle class. They were the ones most invested in perfecting the domestic routine. And sleep, of course, was the jewel at the center of it. You couldn't have chaos touching it. No raised voices, no excited conversations. Certainly no surprise announcements or love letters delivered at the wrong hour. Some households even kept a tranquility bell. A small chime rung at 8:00 p.m. to signal the end of lively activity. After that, everyone was to speak softly, walk slower, and begin preparing their minds and bodies for rest. It's the 19th century version of do not disturb mode, except enforced with quiet glances and the threat of a stern letter from your uncle. You wonder if anyone ever rebelled. Maybe there was a cousin who laughed anyway, who told jokes at supper, sang bawdy tunes, and slept just fine afterward. But if such a person existed, they were likely banished to Australia, or gently drowned in a lake. Still, it's not all repression. There's a kind of eerie beauty to it. The soft winding down of the day, the ritual of serenity, the dimming of lights not just in the house, but in the soul. You watch the fire settle into coals and feel your breath mimic its rhythm. Slow, low, warm. You're reminded that the goal here isn't just sleep. It's sleep earned through discipline. You didn't fritter away your evening watching theatricals or playing whist. You composed your mind. You stilled your pulse. You became, in essence, a sleeping person before you even reached the bed. You're already halfway there. You rise and make your way upstairs. The house creaks politely under your feet. You pass closed doors behind which you imagine others are brushing their hair 100 times, or reciting calming psalms into the mirror. Your room awaits lit with a single candle and the smell of faded lavender. You undress carefully, because clothing rustle is also considered disruptive. You fold each layer with the precision of a museum curator. Nightgown, shawl, slippers. You're transformed into your evening form, quiet, contained slightly damp. And now, the final test. You lie back against the pillow, breathe deeply, and oh no, you remembered the pudding thing again. You're lying in bed, eyes shut, lips pursed, determined not to laugh at the memory of that absurd pudding incident, which naturally only makes it worse. The candle is out. The bed curtains are drawn. Silence enfolds you like a wet wool sock. And yet sleep refuses to arrive. So it's time for the next remedy in your Victorian toolkit chemical intervention. You fumble in the dark for the bottle on your nightstand, an amber glass vial with a paper label so faded it may as well read, "Hope Bottled." You unstopper it, and a pungent, eye-watering bouquet rushes out to greet you, sulfur ammonia, and a hint of something that smells suspiciously like old cabbage. It's your nightly tonic, mixed by your local apothecary, a man with very shiny shoes and a beard that trembles when he talks about the spine. You're not entirely sure what's in this potion, but it's been prescribed with confidence and a flourish of Latin. That's all the reassurance anyone needs in 1872. You inhale. Hard. The vapor scorches your nose, sets your eyes prickling, and somehow makes your ears tingle. The formula is designed to shock the mind from its circular fret and reorient the spirit towards somnolent obedience. You don't know what that means either, but it sounds like something that might work if the lettuce water failed. Victorian pharmacies were playgrounds for the ambitious and the slightly unhinged. The line between medicine and alchemy was blurrier than a foggy London street. One popular sleep aid included ether, another mixed camphor with chloroform, and called it night surrender. If you were lucky, you only passed out. If you weren't, you woke up with your eyebrows missing and a new fear of teaspoons. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of these soporific vapors was driven by genuine belief in their medicinal power or by desperation. After all, insomnia wasn't just inconvenient. It was seen as a moral failing, a mark of weak character or spiritual imbalance. You weren't just tired, you were deficient. So when Dr. Farnaby suggests a tincture of ammonia and valerian, you nod eagerly, ignoring the small print that suggests side effects may include excessive twitching, vivid hallucinations, or momentary out-of-body excursions. You'll take your chances. Anything is better than lying awake, with your brain composing haikus about curtains. You place the vial back on the table and roll onto your side, still reeling slightly from the fumes. The air now smells like an abandoned chemistry classroom. But maybe your nervous system is sufficiently assaulted to permit sleep. It isn't. So you turn to the second line of defense bedtime rituals of the deeply weird variety. You reach for the sachet of dried hops tucked under your pillow. They're supposed to calm the heart. You place a slice of raw onion in a dish under the bed because your aunt insists it draws the night troubles out through the soles. And for good measure, you lay a clean coin on your forehead to ground the thinking faculties. You are now a salad bar with anxiety. But none of this feels outlandish in the context of Victorian medicine. These were the same people who believed insomnia could be caused by reading French novels wearing tight corsets or being born under the wrong zodiac sign. There was even a belief that bed placement affected sleep, too close to a chimney risk of melancholy, aligned with a north-facing wall. Expect dreams of a restless sea. You once rearranged your entire room because a book claimed that westward beds disturbed the ether. Now your feet point due east, and you haven't dreamed of anything more exciting than oatmeal for a week. But even with your head now grounded, your lungs full of sulfur vapor, and your subconscious politely tucked in, you remain stubbornly conscious. The tonic has dulled your edges, but sleep continues to hover at a polite distance, like a cat watching you make a fool of yourself. Maybe it's the gaslighting. Not the metaphorical kind, though your mother does excel at that, but the actual gas lamp that lights your hallway. Even when turned off, it leaves behind a residue, a strange scent, a sense that the walls are still glowing faintly. There's a theory, one you read in a borrowed pamphlet, that gaslight poisoning was causing a silent epidemic of sleeplessness. Too much exposure, they warned, could make your brain harden like overcooked eggs. You contemplate this while massaging a spot behind your ear that's recently developed a twitch. Surely, this is not the life your ancestors dreamed of. But then again, they probably didn't sleep either. The truth is, nobody really knows why the Victorians were so obsessed with sleep. Perhaps because it was one of the few domains of life where control seemed possible. Everything else, politics, disease, empire. The terrifying new concept of bacteria was spiraling. But sleep could be tamed, conditioned, sculpted with enough blankets and vinegar foot baths. Even if it couldn't be achieved, it could at least be performed. You lie back once more and close your eyes, trying to ignore the fact that your face smells like pickled ammonia and your sinuses are staging a protest march. You think calming thoughts. You repeat your nightly mantra. The body is still. The mind is clean. The world is quiet. The bed creaks in response. A pigeon coughs somewhere outside. You are, for better or worse, still awake. But you feel changed. Not sleepy. Not yet. But softened. Your edges have blurred. Your worries have grown tired of themselves. The sulfur might be helping. Or maybe it's just the satisfaction of having tried everything short of self-hypnosis. You drift. You hover. And at last, just as your brain begins composing another terrible poem about bed skirts, you feel it. The subtle tug, the gravitational pull of surrender. Sleep is not arrival. Sleep is letting go. When you finally wake, it's to the dim gray of a new day, leaking in through a sliver in the curtains still heavy, still brocade, still seemingly woven from regret. Your eyes are gummy, your tongue dry as blotting paper, and your first thought is a half-hearted, "Did I survive? You did. Barely." But according to your physician, your problem was never physical. It was moral. The diagnosis, nocturnal unrest, brought on by moral disarray. That's right. In the eyes of many Victorian doctors, sleeplessness wasn't just a quirk of the nervous system. It was a reflection of impurity in thought. You sit up slowly, as if not to alarm your own skeleton, and glance toward the small mirror on your dresser. Do you look impure? It's hard to tell under the layers of petticoat and sweat. The physician you visited last week, Dr. Tillinghurst, a man who smells vaguely of chalk and sternness, suggested that your insomnia might stem from unsettled feelings or sinful ideation. You asked if he meant guilt. He asked if you read novels. You said yes. He nodded gravely and prescribed moral hygiene. Not soap, not baths, thoughts. The prescription included a full course of religious tracts, a ban on emotional stimulation, and something called prayer journaling under lamplight. It also encouraged avoidance of idle chatter and a quiet reflection upon your role in God's larger plan for the empire. You are, after all, a cog in a grand celestial machine. The machine doesn't sleep, but you're expected to. Historians still argue whether Victorian doctors truly believed this blend of moral psychology and light Protestant guilt could cure sleeplessness, or if they simply couldn't think of anything better to say to someone who wouldn't stop fretting at bedtime. But the doctrine held fast in polite circles. If you were good, you slept well. If you were bad, well, welcome to the long dark. You consider this as you kneel beside your bed, back straight, hands folded like a statue of patience. This is your nightly ritual now, prayer before sleep. Not a brief thank you, but a full 20-minute confessional monologue intended to rinse your soul like a particularly shameful piece of laundry. You pray about small things, that you lost your temper when the dog knocked over your book, that you thought about someone's collarbone in a non-approved way, that you pretended to read your aunt's poetry when you actually daydreamed about tea and civil disobedience. This is all part of cognitive stilling, according to Dr. Tillinghurst. You must drain the mind of noise, of lust, of ambition, especially if you're a woman. Men may be allowed a bit of pre-sleep strategizing, but for women, a turbulent mind meant madness or worse, a restless uterus. Ah, yes. The uterus. That deeply misunderstood organ blamed for everything from insomnia to headaches to inconvenient opinions. The wandering womb theory already declining in popularity by the mid-Victorian period still lingered in drawing rooms and whispered consultations. If a woman was wide-eyed past midnight, it was often blamed on an agitated womb, unsettled by social overexertion, spicy food, or too many ideas. You're encouraged to rest, but not too much, to think, but not too hard, to feel, but only within the approved spectrum of spiritual yearning and filial duty, so you keep your mind clean. You avoid fiction after 5 p.m. You stop writing poetry that involves boats. You decline the invitation to that evening lecture about geology because rocks make you feel slightly unsettled. You switch to water-based ink for journaling, since someone claimed iron gall ink had a metallic vibration that carried into the dreams. And still, sometimes you lie awake. That's when the guilt creeps in. Maybe you didn't breathe deeply enough during prayers. Maybe you let your mind wander to that time you accidentally touched Mr. Halbert's hand while passing the salt. Maybe your spiritual lens is fogged. You read that in a pamphlet, and now you're convinced your soul is myopic. You decide to try a new tactic, bedtime literature, curated for moral edification. You choose a volume of sermons, very dry ones, and read by candlelight, blinking slowly as the words blur into abstraction. The soul, made small in obedience, may lie long in peace, one passage says. That might be a quote, or a warning, or both. Eventually, the heaviness returns, not just to your eyes, but to your thoughts. It's a quiet fog that rolls in, softening the edges of your day's regrets. You stretch just a little and feel the bed sigh beneath you. Before you fall asleep, you mutter a small, final prayer, not for forgiveness, but for something even more elusive: permission. Permission to rest, to stop bracing against your own inner noise, to believe that quiet might come not from punishment, but from letting go. You imagine heaven as a darkened bedroom with perfect sheets, where no clocks tick and no guilt rides shotgun, where even the angels whisper and the only sin is forgetting to dream. You turn to your side. Your pillow smells like lavender and ink. Your soul for tonight feels sufficiently scrubbed. Sleep approaches not as a punishment, nor a reward, but as a hush. Tonight, sleep comes easier. You've done your prayers, inhaled the sulfur tonic. Just a sniff this time. You've learned your lesson and avoided any morally ambiguous thoughts about Lord Byron or bread pudding. But just as you're about to drift off, a sharp metallic clang yanks you back to the surface. What was that? Right. You forgot about the bed with built-in alarm bells. This, too, is one of your aunt's many contributions to the household's commitment to sleep management. A brass contraption installed discreetly beneath the mattress. It's rigged to respond to excessive movement, especially snoring or any sudden shifts that might indicate improper repose. And tonight, it decided you were snoring, or rolling, or perhaps merely existing too boldly. The bell chimes once a sharp little reminder that sleep in the Victorian era was not just a natural process. It was a performance, and you are being monitored. You lie still heartbeats skittering. The silence returns slowly, like a cat that's unsure if you've learned your lesson. The bell is quiet now, but you're not. Your thoughts are flailing again, doing a quick review of every embarrassing thing you've done since age 6. Victorians loved a good sleep gadget, from mechanical beds to snore detection devices. The 19th century was a golden age of domestic invention, particularly when it came to managing the unruly body at night. One especially popular item was the slumber alarm, a kind of weight-triggered lever that would tilt the mattress if it sensed too much movement. It was part of a broader trend toward disciplinary sleeping. Historians still argue whether these devices were genuinely medical or just part of a larger cultural obsession with self-regulation. Was the goal health, or just the illusion of control? Either way, you now sleep on a bed that may at any moment throw you sideways like a stubborn donkey. You try to lie perfectly still. You press your hands to your chest like a portrait subject. You focus on your breath, making it as shallow and even as the breathing of a saint, or at least someone who won't trip a brass lever. And just as you're settling again, there's a new sound. Tick, tick, tick. The bedside clock is not content to merely whisper. Tonight it's holding a metronome duel with your heart. It's a squat thing, round-faced and smug, perched atop the nightstand like a tiny judge. Every tick is a disapproving cluck. Every talk a verdict. Still awake, shame. You roll to your side, trying to face away from the clock. But now it seems louder. You swear it's speeding up. You try to ignore it. But it worms into your brain, takes up residence in the folds of your thoughts. Soon, you're thinking in rhythm. Should I move that clock out, side, the door? But you can't, because then you'd have to open the bed curtains. And you know what that means: draft risk, energy leak, soul unsealing, something about the air outside your bed being morally different from the air inside it. Victorian sleep was wrapped in more than just blankets. It was cocooned in ritualized isolation. You weren't supposed to interact with the outside world once you entered your sleep chamber. You were to remain sealed like a sacred text. Still, the ticking persists, and the bell lurks ready to punish your next spasm. You consider briefly removing the mattress alarm, but that would be admitting defeat. You'd have to explain yourself, and everyone would know you couldn't be trusted to sleep like a proper person. So you resort to the next best thing: self-restraint by imagination. You begin to envision your body as a statue, your limbs marble, your breath non-existent. You are no longer a person. You are a decorative object, a vase, a sconce, a ceramic dog on a mantel. This works strangely. Your body stops twitching, your thoughts slow. You even forget about the clock until it chimes the quarter hour, with a cheery little ting like a butler announcing your failure. But this is what Victorian nights were like. Not restful. Watched. Self-surveilled. You were your own warden. And the bed. The bed was the prison and the confessional all at once. Many families believed in night auditing a practice where one family member, usually an anxious aunt, would make the rounds of the bedrooms checking on sleepers, listening at doors, sometimes peeking inside to ensure all was orderly. You once woke to find your cousin Harriet silently watching you from the hallway. She said she was observing stillness. You've had complicated dreams about her since. And then there were journals. Oh, the journals. One popular Victorian tool was the sleep behavior log, a detailed nightly record of when you fell asleep, how long you slept, and whether you dreamed, and if so, of what. Dreams were analyzed for signs of mental imbalance. One girl was sent to a doctor because she dreamed of color. Too stimulating, they said. Prescribed gray flannel sheets. You consider writing in your own journal, but you're too tired, too entangled in fear of the bell to reach for it. Instead, you lie still and think quiet thoughts, dull thoughts, bread-related thoughts. You mentally recite the names of vegetables, root ones only: parsnip, turnip, celeriac, rutabaga. By salsify, you're almost under. Then the bell jingles. Just once. A small metallic whisper. Not even a scold. More like a reminder I'm still here. And so you surrender. Not to sleep, but to the conditions of sleep. You accept the ticking, the occasional bell, the fact that your own mattress is more opinionated than your uncle. You become one with the vigilance. And somewhere wrapped in ritual and repression, you find something close to rest. Morning arrives in the most Victorian way possible, by not arriving at all. The curtains are still drawn. The room remains cloaked in a self-imposed dusk. You lie there in the manufactured night, blinking slowly, your body too tired to rise, too groggy to rest. The bed hasn't ejected you yet. The bell stayed quiet after that last gentle jingle. But the clock, oh, the clock kept at it. It ticked all night like a passive-aggressive ghost, and now its ticking is all you can hear. The air tastes of wool and regret. This is how you begin your day with clock watching and sleep paralysis. You're not actually paralyzed. Not in a medical sense. But your body refuses to obey. You know you should get up, perform your morning ablutions, open the windows, though, only briefly so the bad airs don't linger, and begin the day with sensible thoughts and soft speech. But instead, you lie still, frozen between the expectation of wakefulness and the deep desire to disappear into the mattress. Victorians had a complicated relationship with time, especially nighttime. Daylight was regimented, scheduled, optimized, but night-night was suspicious, dangerous, a space of unmonitored thought, and so they tried to tame it. This meant controlling not just the night, but also the transition out of it. Wake up too slowly, and you were accused of languor. Wake up too quickly, and you risked nervous overstimulation, or even something ominous like snap brain. That's not a joke. A real term. Possibly invented by a very tired man in a tweed vest. You shift your eyes toward the mantel clock. Its round, unblinking face stares back. 6:15. You should get up. But here's the thing. The more you focus on the time, the more power it seems to hold over you. You begin to believe that sleep itself responds to the ticking, that if you don't sleep by a certain hour, the next day will be ruined. That your digestion will falter, your spine will crumple, your moral compass will spin like a drunken weather vane. This anxiety is not new. In fact, by the late 19th century, entire books were being published about clock-related insomnia. One particularly dramatic essay warns the observation of the hour at night is a poison that corrupts the fountain of rest. In other words, knowing the time makes sleep worse. Historians still argue whether this obsession with clocks stemmed from industrial timekeeping or older religious ideas of order and discipline. But either way, you're now trapped in a war with a timepiece. One, you are clearly losing. You remember an article from the Household Whisperer that recommended covering all clocks with silk scarves before bed. You tried that once. The scarf slipped. The ticking got louder, echoing through the fabric like a heartbeat in a crypt. You now believe the clock gains strength from your fear. So you take a different approach. You begin to talk to it. Silently, of course. You are still a Victorian after all. But in your mind, you negotiate. If you let me sleep tonight, you tell the clock, I will dust you more gently. I will wind you with reverence. I will never again think of replacing you with a French model. It does not respond. And still, you lie frozen. Sometimes in the worst moments, you feel the oddest sensation, your body asleep, but your mind alert. A kind of internal disconnect, like the engine's running, but the wheels won't turn. You are pinned, not by the blankets nor the mattress alarm, but by your own dread. Victorians called this night gripping, the sensation of being held fast by invisible hands during the in-between hours. Spiritualists blamed ghosts. Doctors blamed nerves. Children blamed the wallpaper. You blame the whole century. To escape the paralysis, you begin to focus on movement. Just one toe, a finger. You flex it slowly like you're sending Morse code to your own muscles. Eventually, you regain command of your body and swing one leg over the side of the bed. The floor greets you coldly. The next few moments are a blur of stiffness and self-loathing. You mutter something about needing to be more disciplined with your bedtime schedule, even though you spent 2 full hours last night trying not to dream about croquet and existential despair. Downstairs, the world is waking up. The kettle hisses. The coals are being raked in the fireplace. Someone coughs from behind a door. But your mind is still circling last night's failure. You didn't sleep enough. And now everything must be measured. Victorians measured everything hours. Slept dreams, dreamt nocturnal emissions suppressed. They were obsessed with quantifying rest. Sleep journals were kept with the rigor of ledgers. Your mother once tracked her sleep patterns for 6 years and declared she only truly rested in March. March. So you sit at your writing desk and do the same. You log the time you fell asleep, the number of times the bed bell rang, the scent strength of the lavender pouch, and a new edition tension, in left leg mild to theatrical. The clock ticks approvingly. And then, because it's expected, you add a brief reflection. Sleep was brief, but morally satisfactory. Woke thrice. Thoughts centered on time and pudding. Must improve breath control. And then, with a heavy sigh, you seal the journal and prepare for the day. But your mind lingers on that tick, that clock, that ritual of measuring something so unmeasurable. You wonder, did anyone back then ever let go? Did they ever sleep accidentally, joyfully, like a child, collapsing into clover? Or was it always this performance calculation blame? You rise. You fold your nightgown with precision. You greet the ticking not as a friend, but as a frenemy, the kind that always shows up, always has something to say, and never lets you forget that you're behind schedule. And as you begin the slow routine of dressing, you make a promise. Tonight, you will not look at the clock, at least not directly. Evening drapes itself once again over your household, like a thick embroidered shawl. The curtains are drawn, the fire smolders, and every sound has taken on that padded quality. The hush of footsteps, the clink of spoon against china, all of it deliberate, dampened, reverent. You're back in your nightgown, sitting in the parlor, sipping tepid mint water that promises nothing but damp breath and regret. Tonight, you're not alone. Your aunt, your second cousin Elizabeth, and a woman from church with enormous hands, and no sense of when to leave, have gathered. They're not here to socialize. They're here for something far more intimate and strange. They are professional sleep companions. No, not what you're thinking. In the Victorian era, especially in wealthier or more anxious households, It was not unusual to hire or request a companion to help ease you into sleep. Sometimes it was a nurse, sometimes a trusted servant, sometimes a widowed neighbor with calming vocal cords. Their job was simple: to sit nearby, offer gentle conversation, maybe read something boring aloud, and most importantly, ensure you didn't think too hard. You settle into bed, and Elizabeth perches in a chair nearby with a devotional in hand. It's called Evening Submission: Collected Reflections for Moral Weaklings. She begins to read in a soothing low drone, her voice somewhere between a funeral eulogy and a distant train. She doesn't look at you. She doesn't need to. Her presence alone is the medicine. Historians still argue whether this practice emerged from religious caregiving traditions or as an extension of 19th century surveillance culture. The idea that someone always watching was inherently comforting. A living conscience, with warm hands and a shawl. You lie back. The companion doesn't demand conversation. In fact, she discourages it. The goal is not stimulation, but containment, a soft verbal tucking in. Elizabeth drones on about spiritual strength in the face of mustard seeds, and humility before seasonal vegetables. You feel your thoughts start to melt like butter on overcooked toast. This, you think, is not sleep in the modern sense. This is submission, ritualized surrender. You're not drifting into unconsciousness. You're being escorted. Professional sleep companions were especially popular among women, children, the elderly, and let's be honest, anyone whose mind was louder than a tea kettle. Some companions were known for their storytelling, long, winding tales, with no climax, no surprise, just descriptions of fields and fog, and occasionally a tame squirrel. Others specialized in silence, simply sitting in the room, knitting or shelling peas, a human anchor against the tide of midnight thought. Yours seems to fall somewhere in between. As Elizabeth flips to the next passage about meekness and modesty, you catch a glimpse of her shoes. Sturdy, sensible, the kind that would never dream of dancing. You feel weirdly reassured. No one wearing those shoes would allow anything improper to happen in the night. Eventually, she stops reading. She closes the book softly and begins what can only be described as emotional foot-rubbing. This is optional, of course, but you're grateful for it. Her touch is firm but distant, as if massaging is merely a side effect of her real goal, removing your capacity for independent thought. And it's working. You're sinking. Your limbs feel far away. You're pretty sure your ears are dissolving. You let out a breath you've been holding for 12 hours. And then, because your brain is rude, you begin to question it. Who decided this was normal? Why is there a stranger rubbing your feet while describing the meekness of loaves? Are you being cared for or conditioned? Victorian sleep companionship walked a fine line between comfort and surveillance. It provided a human buffer against the abyss of sleeplessness, but also reinforced the notion that rest must be monitored, earned, and always conducted under the watchful eye of someone purer than you. You glance up. Elizabeth is now quietly humming, something hymn-like, something wordless. You're not sure if it's for you or herself. You close your eyes and try to let go. The idea of being watched is less disturbing than you'd expected. It's not intrusive, it's anchoring. You're no longer responsible for yourself. Someone else holds the vigil. Someone else will hear if your breath changes. Someone else is watching the clock. You allow yourself to fall backward mentally into a space of not needing to perform, not needing to be good, just quiet, This is what the Victorians feared most unsupervised minds. Left to wander, they might stumble into anxiety, lust rebellion, or poetry. But tethered to a companion's gentle voice, your mind stays soft, dull obedient. You are safe. Sleep begins its slow descent. Your hands twitch once a little rebellion. Elizabeth pats your ankle. You're all right, she says, and you believe her. Somewhere across the house, another companion reads aloud to a fretful uncle. Another rubs a widow's shoulders with rosemary oil. Another dozes in a corner while a child clutches a hot brick for comfort. It's a small industry, quiet, fleeting. But in this house, in this moment, it's the most sacred act of all. You finally sleep. Not because you're tired, but because someone stayed awake for you. The next evening, you wake from a brief nap in your chair, a crime according to the household handbook, and shuffle into the kitchen to find your great-uncle holding a bottle of something cloudy and green. He looks far too pleased with himself. You squint at the label. It says lettuce and poppy tonic, for the nervous, the restless, and the incurably reflective. Ah, so it's come to this. The bottle is heavy, glass corked wrapped in twine and promise. You uncork it cautiously. The scent hits you like the memory of a garden that never really thrived earthy vegetal with a sharp medicinal twist. You detect hints of camphor, something milky, and something else entirely. Opium, your uncle says cheerfully as he ladles some into your cup. Very small amount. You freeze. Because this is the moment you realize that the lettuce water was never the whole story. It was the start, the garnish, the plausible part of the potion, the base note in a far more intoxicating perfume. Yes, it turns out that the great lettuce craze, the one touted in every household guide and maternal advice pamphlet, was often secretly supercharged, mixed with tinctures of poppy laudanum morphia, or occasionally chloroform. Many so-called natural sleep aids were closer to chemical lullabies than salads in a teacup, and everyone knew, or at least everyone sort of accepted it. Historians still argue whether Victorian women were truly unaware of what they were taking, or simply colluding with the system out of sheer exhaustion. After all, if your choices are lie awake, thinking about the empire until dawn, or sip a warm herbal drink that makes your knees melt well, would you ask too many questions? You lift the cup. The tonic is warm, bitter. It clings to your throat with the stubbornness of a poorly thought-out romance. Within minutes, your muscles slacken. Your thoughts, once pin-sharp and mildly judgmental, become soft and forgiving. Your heartbeat fades to background static. And then you understand. The lettuce wasn't the cure. It was the cover story. It made everything look respectable, gentle, appropriate for mothers and daughters and unmarried women with nervous stomachs. No one blinked when you said you were taking your lettuce. They blinked a lot more when you collapsed mid-sentence and dreamed of riding giant moths into battle. By the mid-19th century, opium had become the silent hero of British domestic life, in pills and powders and lozenges for infants, in patent tonics sold under names like Dr. Godfrey's Cordial or Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup. It lulled babies calmed, mothers softened grief, and more than anything else put people to sleep. Laudanum opium dissolved in alcohol was sold in every apothecary prescribed for every malady. Headaches, melancholy, indigestion, overthinking. It was the Netflix of its day, always available, always numbing. You lie back in bed now, limbs loose, mind wrapped in silk. The curtains flutter slightly. A draft dares to enter, and you don't even care. Your body could levitate, and you'd just sigh and roll the other way. The tonic works. Oh, it works. Which of course means it's probably terrible for you. One pamphlet in your aunt's reading drawer warns of viscous blood and moral torpor. Another describes withdrawal as a condition involving nervous disobedience and wild nocturnal trembling. Delightful. But in this moment you feel none of that. Just the deep, delicious release of sleep sneaking up on you like a patient cat. Your thoughts come slower, now gentler. You picture lettuce leaves cradling you, poppies nodding in agreement, your bed becoming a field, your pillow a soft hillock. And yet some tiny sliver of your brain, probably the Protestant bit, whispers, should you be enjoying this much, you ignore it, because the truth is, sleep in the Victorian age was complicated. It had rules, reputations, rituals, but underneath all the self-discipline and drapery, there was also fear. Fear of the mind unmoored, fear of being caught awake in a world that prized serenity, fear that you might never shut off. So they medicated, quietly, decorously, a drop here, a sip there, a cousin who slept for 17 hours and was praised for her stillness. No one asked how. They just bought the same bottle. You open one eye. The room is warm. Your limbs are beyond your control, now happy passengers in a vehicle driven by poppy and lettuce, and the gentle erosion of moral concern. You smile, just a little. The companion from last night sits nearby. She's doing her knitting, humming something that doesn't exist outside this room. You wonder if she knows what was in your cup. You wonder if she minds. She glances up, catches your eye, and nods once approval or complicity you'll never know. You drift, and in that drift, you understand the true Victorian compromise. Sleep at any cost, as long as the label says herbal. When you awake, it's later than usual. The light peeking through the curtains is slanted and golden, which means you've done something scandalous. You've overslept. You sit up groggy, but suspiciously content. The room smells like old flowers and vaguely singed linen. You feel rested, or possibly just sedated. The line is thin. You wiggle your toes, test your arms, confirm that your extremities still report for duty. Everything works. That's a relief. But now, a more pressing question looms. What precisely did you sleep on? You toss back the layers, quilt coverlet counterpane, mysterious knitted square, and finally press your palm into the mattress beneath. It doesn't feel like a cloud or a board. It feels like a judgment. Welcome to the world of Victorian mattress politics. Your bed is stuffed with horsehair because that's what someone once said builds character. The strands are coarse, prone to bunching, and emit a subtle barnyard musk when damp. But they're firm, upright, morally unimpeachable. That's what matters. Mattresses, you've learned, are status symbols as much as sleep devices. In polite circles, the content of your bedding could say more about you than your pedigree. Historians still debate whether mattress stuffing was chosen for health class or sheer tradition. But the truth likely lies in the intersection of all three. A good Victorian mattress was as much about who you were as how you slept. There were the straw beds favored by farmers and poor city dwellers, cheap, lumpy rustling like autumn whenever you rolled over. There were feather beds, once the height of indulgence, now considered decadent and morally questionable. Too soft for the spine, and the spirit warned one pamphlet. Then came wool, praised for its warmth and vermin resistance. But wool retained odors and required aggressive beating every few weeks. Your cousin Eustace beat his so hard it exploded. He never spoke of it again. And of course, the horsehair elite. Dense, resilient, good for posture, less good for dreams. They were seen as the ideal compromise, not too luxurious, not too rustic. They said I take my sleep seriously, but not sinfully. Then came the springs. Ah, the springs. A technological advancement met with suspicion. Victorian magazines warned that spring mattresses could jostle the organs, disrupt the blood's flow. And most concerning cause, fidgeting. Fidgeting was the first step toward doom. Your own mattress is technically a hybrid horsehair top spring interior wool lining. It weighs as much as a retired carriage horse and emits a disapproving creak whenever you shift your moral compass. You lie back and listen to it complain, that one high-pitched squeak near your left shoulder blade sounds like it's saying sloth. The groan near your hip indulgence. This bed doesn't support you, it interrogates you. Still, it could be worse. You recall your visit to Aunt Philomena's seaside cottage, where you were forced to sleep on seaweed-stuffed cushions. Very breathable, she'd said, as you wheezed through the stench of damp kelp. You didn't sleep. You fermented. Or your friend Maud, whose progressive husband insisted on air mattresses filled with hand-pumped ether. He swore the fumes aligned with the body's moon cycle. They both now live in a sanitarium in Bath. Yes, mattresses mattered. There were entire catalogues, some the size of encyclopedias detailing the merits of curled horsehair over shredded coir, or the dangers of inferior straw blends from dubious colonies. Each brand promised moral rest, spinal purity, and sleep, unmarred by worldliness. Some households even maintained rotating mattresses, one for summer, one for winter, one for guests, and one that no one used, but everyone respected. The heirloom mattress said to have cured Uncle Rupert's gout by simply being near it. You rise from your own mattress carefully, trying not to betray any disloyalty. You whisper your thanks. You adjust the counterpane. You do not question the faint imprint of your dreams in the center dent. This bed has judged you, and you must now move on. At breakfast, the topic of mattresses inevitably arises. Your cousin's is filled with lamb's wool. Very progressive, someone mutters, as if she'd taken up fencing with anarchists. Your uncle, meanwhile, insists that a straw mattress builds backbone. He's had 6 surgeries. The conversation turns to mattress-flipping schedules. Your great-aunt claims hers is flipped every full moon. It's a rainy afternoon, which Victorians would tell you is the perfect time for a short, rejuvenating rest. And yet the thought of napping fills you with an unnameable dread. You stare at the chaise lounge, like it's asking you to commit treason. Because in this house, naps are a moral weakness. You could scream into a pillow, and it would be more acceptable than dozing off at 2:30 in the afternoon. Victorian society prized wakefulness, alertness, uprightness, both spinal and spiritual. Sleeping during daylight hours, unless you were under 5 or terminally ill, was a sign of feebleness, poor discipline, and possibly French tendencies. Yes, the French. Always the French. If the Victorians disliked something but couldn't explain why they blamed the French, and the French, as everyone knew, embraced leisure, reclining, sighing, probably napping. You, meanwhile, are supposed to power through. Rain or no rain, weak ankles or a splitting headache. You are a creature of will. Historians still argue whether this anti-nap sentiment was about industrial productivity, Protestant work ethic, or pure cultural snobbery. Most likely, it was all 3 bundled up in crinoline and sweat. Your mother, for instance, never naps. She drinks thin tea, She rests her eyes. But actual sleep? Never. She insists that if God had intended humans to sleep twice in a day, he would have designed a second sunrise. You're not sure how that works, but she says it with conviction. Your father, on the other hand, once nodded off after lunch and dreamed of catching fish with spoons. He didn't speak for 3 hours afterward, so of course, the urge to nap strikes with full force. Your eyes are heavy. Your brain has begun narrating your thoughts in the voice of a weary governess. You reach for your book, but realize you've been reading the same sentence for 10 minutes. She placed the bouquet on the sill and sighed. Then she sighed again. You sigh too, and the chaise looks so forgiving. You sneak toward it like a fugitive from duty. You lie down sideways, not fully of course, just in a morally ambiguous lean. You place a hand over your stomach like a grieving widow. You close one eye, but not both, because someone might see. Your aunt enters the room and pauses. She doesn't say anything. She adjusts a curtain. She moves a coaster 1 inch to the left. She makes it known through sheer presence that this is not rest time. And then she leaves. You exhale heart-pounding and sit up. You're no longer sleepy, just filled with an ancient kind of guilt. To nap is to admit that you are fallible, that the body cannot run endlessly on virtue and barley water, that perhaps, just perhaps, you are not a perfect engine of productivity and polite thought, which is dangerous. So instead of sleep, you reach for your journal and begin the daily reflection, resisted temptation of midday slumber, thoughts impure, but not acted upon, spine firm, morale questionable, vision slightly doubled. Victorians had alternatives to napping. They believed in quiet sitting. You were allowed to rest as long as you didn't actually close your eyes. One book even recommended knitting in a darkened room while thinking about the ocean. Not being near the ocean, just thinking about it. Preferably one with no waves. Just still water and self-denial. Even medical professionals tiptoed around the subject of daytime sleep. Some warned that it could displace your nightly rhythm. Others claimed it could trigger a kind of madness called twilight inertia. One especially dramatic theory suggested that daytime sleep lures the soul from its correct orbit, which frankly sounds amazing. Still, you obey. You resist. You choose consciousness, however weary over indulgence. Your reward is a throbbing temple mild nausea, and a pervasive sense that you've been mildly punished by God for something involving porridge. This is fine. After all, you're Victorian. You don't seek comfort. You endure. At dinner, your cousin brags that she once went 4 days with only 6 hours of sleep due to her charity work and persistent sinus dread. She's praised for her strength. You wonder if she's hallucinating. You also wonder if anyone would notice if you slept with your eyes open, like a very disappointed owl. Later that night, you sit by your window watching the rain. It slithers down the glass like a lullaby. The wind murmurs in the chimney. The world is tucking itself in, and you feel like the only one still awake. You're not, of course. Across town, hundreds, maybe thousands of others are perched in their parlors, refusing rest out of habit and pride, all wide-eyed and vibrating with tea, all terrified of being seen as idle, all yearning for that thing they deny themselves daily, permission. And somewhere someone has had enough. They curl on a settee, wrap themselves in a shawl, and nap. Just a little. 10 minutes. Maybe 15. They wake feeling human, almost rebellious. Tomorrow they'll lie. Say they were doing spiritual reflection. Say they were resting their lungs. But they'll know, and you'll know. Sleep, it turns out, is not just a necessity. In the Victorian age, it's an act of courage. The night deepens. The world outside your window falls silent, save for the occasional whisper of rain and the faint rustle of leaves against the pane. You lie, still beneath your heavy layers, the accumulated weight of quilts pressing against your skin like a physical memory. The room is dim, the only light a soft glow from a dying candle you dare not extinguish. Your breath is slow now, even. The constant ticking of the clock in the corner has softened into a rhythmic murmur like a distant heartbeat. The curtains hang heavily, muffling the world beyond, wrapping you in a cocoon of fabric and shadow. You find yourself drifting not with the suddenness of a plunge, but with the gentle ease of a leaf settling on a still pond. The relentless thoughts that plagued your mind hours ago have faded, replaced by a calm emptiness. The weight of your body is a comfort rather than a burden, a quiet embrace coaxing you towards rest. Sleep here is not the wild surrender of dreams or the chaotic freedom of unconsciousness. It is a slow release, a gradual letting go, a soft fading of the edges until the world blurs and the mind quiets. You feel the tension in your shoulders, soften your jaw, unclench the fluttering unrest in your chest, slow to a steady rhythm. The heavy curtains that once felt like tombs now feel like shields, guarding you from the noise, the light, the chaos of waking life. Your eyelids grow heavy. The warmth of the layered blankets seeps into your skin. The faint scent of lavender and boiled greens lingers, a reminder of the strange rituals and remedies that brought you here. You do not fight the sleep. You do not chase it. You allow it to come gently, like a whispered promise. The day will come soon enough with its demands and its judgments. But for now, in this quiet room beneath these heavy curtains, with the weight of centuries of care and concern pressing softly upon you, there is only peace. You are held. You are safe. You are free to rest. And so finally, you drift away. Nen, your brother insists on doing it seasonally aligned with equinoxes. Someone mentions the new rotary frame that allows flipping without lifting. Scandalous. Mechanical laziness dressed as innovation. You quietly sip your barley tea and try not to ask the real question burning in your tired brain. Did anyone actually sleep better because of all this? Or was it just another performance? Because here's the secret. No one says aloud. No mattress fixes a racing mind. You could sleep on a bed of goose down and opium petals, and still lie awake rehearsing conversations, doubting choices, replaying the moment you said you too, to the man who blessed your cough. Sleep doesn't live in the springs or stuffin'. It lives in silence, in trust, in surrender. But it helps if the mattress doesn't crunch like firewood. So tonight, you'll fluff the wool, recenter the horsehair, offer a small apology for that foot kick at 3 a.m., and maybe the bed will forgive you.